Hey guys, welcome to my new video series where I show you how to use EQ quickly and effectively on every instrument. Let's do it. So let's start with the kick. I have a few kicks loaded here, and kicks usually have the same problems. They are usually muddy, they usually lack top end, and they usually have some sort of low end issue which we have to check. Now, what I have to say right up front is that no EQ decisions can be made without good monitoring. So at one point in your career, it will be unavoidable to buy a good set of monitors or headphones, or ideally both. I put in the description what I use. It's just my personal preference, but whatever works for you and whatever you think is linear for your ears. So let's start right away with kick number one. Kick number one is an acoustic kick. Let's have a look at how it sounds. So you can hear there's a little bit of bleed. It has probably been EQ'd a little bit already during the recording stage. And I have to say that this is an excellent example of a really good kick. If I receive these kind of kicks every time, it would be absolutely fantastic. So let's have a quick look at what we can do EQing this particular kick. I'm using the Infinity EQ from Slate just because it has a really good analyzer and it's quite intuitive, but any EQ will do. So this kind of curve is usually what you'll see with kicks. You'll have a big low end followed by a massive gap in the mid-range, and then somewhere in the upper mids in the treble you'll see a peak, which is the attack of the kick. In this particular kick, what I hear is that we have a little bit of boxiness, and we can see it's this kind of range here, a bit too much of the 200-500 range. And of course, we'll probably want a little bit more of the attack to make it cut through in any kind of setting. The low end I'll want to cut off because we really don't need anything below 30, realistically even 40-50 hertz. But in these days, in most genres, we tend to keep it. So let's have a listen in what we can do with this kick. So you can hear this range, which of course boosts now all of this here, is that we don't really need it. And one of my earlier teachers told me a really great trick when using EQ is remove what you don't need and boost what you do need. And particularly in the kick, you want to remove anything that is not punch or attack. It's so simple and makes so much sense. No? So all you want is really the punch in the low end and the attack. So this will remove. And to be honest, this would already do the trick. Now, if it wasn't for the situation that today we tend to mix really bright, with a lot of attack in the kick, just because of headphones and the way we consume music, I would probably be happy to go with this, at least without the context around it. But I will definitely need a bit more juice. Let's see. So this is with a bit more attack, or quite a bit more attack, and this is a nice 5 dB boost, and this will cut through your guitars, your basses, your vocals quite well. Personally, I like to use a wide bell when I'm EQing the attack, and this is very important, guys, because I don't want to boost the excess bleed from any other instruments, especially the cymbals, of course. And simultaneously, I also don't want to use a too narrow boost, because what you get then is an attack that is a bit too pointy and that doesn't cut through on every system. Like if you have NS10s and you boost a lot of the 2K, for instance, then you'll have a very present 2K. But on other speakers that don't have that present 2K, it might not work. So you want to have a nice broad boost. You want to boost basically all of the attack and all of its harmonics, right? It's a very harmonic, there's a lot of content in there, even if it sounds quite narrow and pointy. So I want to use a wide boost like that in the upper mids. And then we can do the same thing in the low end. We can use a bell just to boost a little bit around 80. 80 is good because it can be played back by smaller earpods as well these days. Much lower, I wouldn't go. Hip hop, later on I'll show you maybe 60, 70 hertz. 100, it tends to become a bit muddy. 200, we don't need. So this is the range, 80, where I usually have my boost on the kick. Let's have a listen. So right about here, again, for what is this, 3 dBs boost is that I feel comfortable with. And this is it, this is kick number 1 in the case of a really good recording. Let's have a look at before and after. Happy days. Let's check the next one. Now, this particular kick is more in line with the reality of what most mixers will receive 90% of the time. Not very well recorded, very muddy, no attack. It's really just a blob in the low mids and the low end, and even the analyzer will confirm this if we see. There's very little of the attack here and a lot of the mud down here that we have to manage somehow. And in the beginning of your mixing careers, and if you're starting out to record with not very good quality kick drums, not very good quality microphones, and not very good rooms, this is most likely what you'll get many, many times. So let's see, we can fix it, So right off the bat, we definitely don't need this rumble below 20. So again, I'll do a low cut at 30. And already we can see that it is more of a knock. It's more of a pleasant knock instead of like a muddy blob. So this already helped quite a bit. Now in this case, first I want to fix the attack first, because without having the attack, I don't know quite how much and what I want to remove. So if the attack is completely missing, then I first want to recover it, and then I can see how the mid-range reacts to that. Okay, so now we have an attack going, and already we can hear that it's not as muddy. And this is a good EQ trick for other instruments as well. If you're really missing something, try to recover or boost that first before starting to cut away any other frequencies, because you might not have to be so aggressive with the cuts then. But here still I feel that we need a bit less of the mud. And again, I just do a little bit of my EQ sweep here and check what is not punch and what is not attack, and where this boost makes it the worst, basically. So I do a generous boost, I sweep, and where is the kick the worst? And right now I find that it's around here, 300 hertz. So this cleared it up quite a lot already, and now I'm just going to do my low-end boost again. So on this particular kick, because it's a lower pitched kick, I had to do this boost a little bit lower, because if I do it too high, then it just becomes muddy. So you also have to take into account what kind of kick recording it is. If it's of course very high pitched, then you will not get naturally that much low end. And if it's very low pitched, then the resonance, the main body, will of course be a bit lower, like in this particular case. So this is okay. It's not the perfect kick, but it's also not the perfect recording. So we have to manage our expectations. But still, we made quite a huge difference with only 3 curves here and the cut. So let's have a look. So this will work well. Now let's move on to the next one. What happens if you have multiple microphones, which is very, very common. And of course, if you're recording kicks, I encourage you to use a kick in and a kick out. If you can, a kick sub as well. More on that when we talk about recording in the future. First, what I do, of course, is I check the phase and the polarity. Polarity meaning, does the kick go in the same direction on both recordings? And in this case, yes, it does. And phase being, does it start at the same time? Now, of course, there is a distance difference between the kick in and the kick out, and that will lead to a phase difference as well, as we can see here that one of them is, of course, delayed because it's further away from the beater. Now, I like to align these ideally with the transition, the zero transition being in one spot. And this way we'll get the best kick sound, we'll get the maximum amplification of every wave here. It's a small but a very noticeable difference. Let's have a listen at the kick in. Very typical kick in, quite clicky, a lot of punch, really, really good content. And of course, because it's so close to the beater head, you tend to get a lot of the spill from the cymbals as well and the hi-hat often. Let's have a listen to the out. Also very typical because this microphone is a lot further from the beater head, maybe even completely outside of the kick. I have not done this recording myself. Of course, you don't have that much of the click, but you have a really good body. When I receive kicks like this, I do like to do a little bit of a cleanup first individually. So let's start with the kick in. Now we see that we still have quite a good punch going on in the lows, and to be honest, I don't like to waste it. I don't want to cut it away, I want to use it. It's very, very useful and it's very tight. We don't hear any rumbles, so I want to keep it, but I'm gonna put my low cut again at around 35 Hertz. And then let's see what else we have here. So of course we have the usual low-mid problem right between 200 and 500. You can see that this is almost a copy-paste thing across every kick that you ever get. So this kick is nicely cleaned up now, I think. We still retained a lot of this low-end punch. Of course, we cannot hear it that much because the attack is just so much more present. And then what we can do is we'll do kind of the inverse on the kick out. So here we can hear there's no usable attack at all. Anything that we get here that seems like attack is actually snare and cymbal. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be a bit more aggressive. I'm going to remove everything below, let's say, 800. Or even a bit more aggressive. So everything below 400 is basically gone. And let's have a look at the lows as well. As you can see, I'm using quite steep filters because I want to be really tight on the low end. So this sounds like quite a healthy knock. I think this is also enough EQ. I might want to clean up a bit more of the 200 later, but let's see how it works when we actually blend it in with the attack. So this sounds pretty good. We have a really good attack, we have a really good punch, but let's see if we can now EQ the two of them together, because of course when you combine two microphones or any two sound sources, there will be interaction which is beyond of just the individual components. So we want to have a look if we need to do any further cleanup. I didn't like this 900,000 Hertz nosy knock here. This sounds pretty good to me. Without compression and without anything, I think this is a really good kick like this. Perfect. So for a modern kick sound, I think this works. Of course, in the mix, I would go a lot further and add parallel compression, distortion maybe, because I think this came from like a modern rock mix, and I went quite all out, but I think as a basis, this is the perfect sound. Let's have a listen at a more vintage but still recorded kick. Now this is again the kind of scenario you will come across very, very often. Not a very good recording, kick, not tuned that well, it's quite muddy, it's not that good, but let's see what we can do with this. Again, we have a kick in and a kick out. Let's have a listen. So, in a more vintage setting, we don't need that much attack, of course. Often it is enough to have a pillowy kick, but of course we do want some presence on our kicks. But what we want to do every time is, of course, remove unwanted muddy frequencies. And here we can see how the low end curves up already quite a bit. So we definitely want to clean up the subs. So here the muddy range was quite a bit higher, it was around 500, and you can even hear that it has this woofy sound. And of course, in a more vintage kick, the attack is a lot lower. So you want it around 2000 instead of the kind of rocky, metally 8K. Let's have a look at the out. It has a very nice knock. It's actually very pleasant around 250 to 200. But of course, here we also have the mud in the very lows, the rumble. And again, I don't hear a lot of value in the higher frequencies. So again, I can cut quite a bit away here. But I quite like this 1K knock in the case of the vintage kick. Can you hear how it cleaned up right now just by removing this 230, 250 range? So now we have quite a good knock and quite a good pillowy sound. And again, this is perfect to be blended in with the kick in. So we do get a bit more body, but we're also getting a nasty something around the 500 1K range. Let's have a look. So this is a usable vintage kick sound, and now we can decide with a high shelf how much of the attack we want. Do we want a more pillowy sound? And of course we reduce it. Do we want more attack? Then of course we'll boost it, but in that case of course I'll use a bell EQ like always. And the low end I can also set. One other thing with kicks is that they basically function as two instruments. So they have the low end, the low punch that supplements a foundation to your music, and you have the upper attack that is the punctuation, that is the rhythmic element more to it. So we have to make sure these are always in balance and they fulfill their roles ideally. Personally, I don't think we need a lot more low end on this one, so I'm just going to leave it at this, just add a little bit of boost. Sounds perfect to me. The kick pop that I have here is between the vintage and the modern one. Let's have a look and let's see if we can cheat this time. Let's see if we can copy paste one of the settings onto the other and get acceptable results, just as an experiment. As it turns out, we can. So I think this is perfect. I don't really feel like doing anything else with it. We had exactly the same issues and you can see the curves are very similar across every kick that we have touched so far. Let's have a look if we can maybe tweak the mids a little bit differently. No, it's basically the same. In this pop setting, I might add a little bit more of the top end just to get a more clicky, a bit more present attack, but that's about it, I think. So as you can see, kicks always have the same problems. It's a matter of setting the top end and the bottom end well, and then shaping that mid-range to your liking, essentially. And it's always removing the mid-range, it's always removing mud, and it's always boosting top, and it's always making sure the bottom is level with the top nicely. We have one more pop kick. Let's have a look at this one. This is also a kick in and a kick out. And just for demonstration's sake, I'm just gonna copy paste all the settings again from the previous one. So as you can hear, we are kind of on the right track, but it's a bit too aggressive for this one. Let's have a look. But it still works, and I wouldn't do it any differently, to be honest, and there's not much we can do because the recording of this one is not that good. So now last, let's have a look at 3 electronic kicks as well. We have the kick hip-hop here. When it comes to programmed kicks, what I hope to receive from my clients are the samples that work. So I don't want to have to change them too much. I want a sample that is clean, that has the right kind of attack, the right kind of body, and all the changes I want to make are just regarding the context. So I want to make sure this kick fits into the song. So right now when I listen to it, I think, okay, it's a good kick. There's not much I want to do because it sounds perfect. I don't think there's too much mod. The attack is quite okay and the low end seems quite tight as well. However, in the context, I might want to add a bit more knock and a bit more presence. Let's have a look. Now in a hip-hop setting, I don't remove that much of the lower mids because that's actually where most of the sound lives. So hip-hop has a very knocky sound usually, so we want to preserve as much of this lower mid-range as possible. In hip-hop, the kick has a different role. It has a much more of the punchy sound. It is not just a rhythm, it is also much more of the foundation of the song. And the basses are usually almost secondary in many genres. Of course, it's quite different these days with the 808s taking over, but that's a different story altogether. So this particular kick, I won't do a lot more. We just boost a little bit of the low end, a bit of the top, clean it up a little bit, but it might even just be my monitoring. We might not even have to do that. But it works. It's the same sound, it's just better. It's just a bit louder, it's a bit punchier, it's just a bit improved. And that's all we want in these kind of settings. Let's have a listen at a vintage kick. So in this kind of kick, I would keep that range that I would usually remove, and that's this one here, right about 800. Because this is the charm, this is actually the essence of this sound. So this is something we'd want to feature quite prominently in the mix later on. However, I'm not quite happy with the low end because there's not enough, so I want to have a bit more of that. As you can see, it's a very tight sample because there's actually nothing below 60. So I'm just gonna have a bell right about 50, just a bit below, just to not boost too much of the mud, and that will do the trick. So this will be a nice foundation in terms of low end, and then in the mix I would decide, I would almost use a second bell EQ as a volume fader to set the presence of this kick. This is completely down to the context, but it will be around the 5K range. Next one, and also the final one for today, we have the Electro kick. So as you can hear, it's a very typical, I receive these kind of kicks a lot. It has a very rattly top end, it has stereo content, it's quite a heavily affected kick, but there's these kind of samples that you get a lot, even in production and mixing. As you can see, it has a very, very full range. It has everything basically from 10 Hertz up to 20K. I'm not sure if that's needed. Let's see what we can do with this. So this kind of does the trick for me. Again, in electronic kicks, the sample should be good. So when I receive a really bad sample that doesn't work with the song, I will encourage the artist or the producer to change it. I will maybe make recommendations, I'll send them a few samples of my own, or usually they're just very happy to have a second look and replace the kick completely if needed. But of course, I always assume that the productions were made to the best capability of the producer. So I assume that the producer tried a lot of samples and has made a really thorough decision on what kick to use. So what I don't want to do is changing this kick. I don't want to change the essence. I don't want to change its sound. I just want to enhance it. And these kind of mellow curves that we have here are perfect and more than enough to make subtle enhancements on the kick. Of course, in a hip-hop setting, I would then maybe do some parallel compression to just maybe add a little bit more of a boost to it, but that also just enhances what is already there. Okay, so this is the kick drum video. I hope you liked it. I hope you found it helpful. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, and of course hit me up if you want to work with me for mixing. I also do one-on-one classes, which are a tremendous success. Nowhere else will you get it. 4-5 hours, one go, just all the topics covered, everything from the basics to advanced techniques and everything in between. I usually do 3-session bundles. That seems to be very popular, but of course having one session is also possible if you just have one issue that you want to resolve in your mixing or production work. So check out my website below where you can contact me directly, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, happy mixing. Bye bye.